Hello and welcome to The Membership, a podcast inspired by the life and works of Wendell Berry, the Kentucky farmer and writer. I am your host, John Pattison. Here on The Membership, we do deep dives into Berry's writings, but we also interview folks from all walks of life who are putting Berry's ideas into action where they live. And that is why it's my great pleasure to welcome to the show this week, Matt Wheeler. Matt is a singer-songwriter from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and Matt's albums are often inspired by works of classic literature, including the works of C.S. Lewis, J.R.R. Tolkien, and the book Watership Down, among many others. And Matt recently launched a Kickstarter campaign for his newest album, A Hard History of Love. And that record is a suite of songs and stories and even some original poetry inspired by Wendell Berry's short story collection, That Distant Land. Matt, thank you so much for being here.
It is a pleasure. Thanks for having me, John.
Absolutely. So the first question we always ask our guests is the same, and that is about their Wendell Berry origin story. Do you remember how and when you originally encountered Berry's work and kind of what your first impressions were?
I'd say the first that I ever heard the name Wendell Berry was in the music of a singer-songwriter that I got to know the work of in Virginia, where I went to college. In fact, it's someone named Jacob Zachary. He made references to the Mad Farmer. He shouted out Wendell by first name. And I didn't know at first who he was talking about until I did a little bit of digging. I mean, it was early days of the internet in the, I don't know, around 2000, late 90s. But I was able to find enough to realize he was talking about Wendell Berry. And I guess like that stuck with me. And I guess I'd heard a little bit more about him over the years. And then the time was right to check out his work. Right around the time my son was born, I was laid off from the job I was working, like within 3 weeks of when he was born, which seems really inopportune. Turns out to have been providential. I had more time to spend with him and my wife as we were figuring this whole parenting family thing out. But the other thing was I went ahead and checked out some books, some Wendell Berry books in the library. I started with The Wild Birds, the suite of short stories, which interestingly, most, if not all of those are part of That Distant Land that this project's based on. It's hard to describe the appeal. It's not that heady, but it's very real. The way he describes characters, you feel like you're getting to know them. So I read, I think the next book after that might have been Hannah Coulter, and Jibber Crow followed not too long after. It was later on that I got into like the essays, and I read his collected poetry maybe 4 or 5 years ago and did some free writings from it, which that's where the poem that appears in this album came from. As I revisited that, it seemed like the right time to pull it out. Shortly after that being laid off and reading The Wild Birds, I decided to check out more, like what else is there, and end up reading like The Memory of Old Jack, and I'm trying to think of, I think that Distant Land was somewhere a little farther down the line. I remember really enjoying Ptolemy Proudfoot and Miss Minnie Quinch in particular as characters, and they feature heavily in this new album too. So yeah, I mean, it was basically, interestingly enough, was through song that was introduced to Wendell Berry, and then just digging in, and shout out to public libraries. I was able to do the interlibrary loan between the different branches, and get almost all of the fiction. I think I read Remembering Then, and of course there's some newer stuff that I've read more recently, because somehow Wendell Berry is still churning out books in his like mid to late 80s.
Yeah, as we're recording this, he's 80, like he just turned 89.
Yes. Yeah. And he's doing remarkably well.
Yeah.
And I wish him many more years. And I mean, partly because I'd like to read more of his work, but he just seems like such a quality guy.
Now, it's not necessarily true of everyone, but I'm surprised how many people that I talk to who like Wendell Berry's work tend to prefer the fiction to the nonfiction, or the poetry to the fiction. Not that they don't like the other stuff, but they're especially drawn to like one particular style of his writing. Is that true of you, or are you kind of general purpose, you like it all?
I do like it all, but I would say, like, no question that the Port William fiction was the was my entrance in, and I was hooked. And then it was more like later on, it's almost like, you're listening to Spotify or something, and or you're watching something on YouTube, and it's like, well, you might also like this. And sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. But it's like,
Mm-hmm.
but like the back of a book, it'll be like, also by Wendell Berry, and it'll have these different categories. And I'm like, oh, essays and poetry too. So I would say, like, I came to the other parts later. I would say I pretty readily picked up the poetry. I enjoy his use of language, and I appreciate that he used it so many different ways.
Mm.
The essays, I feel like sometimes are a little more of an acquired taste. Sometimes I really love them. Like I'm currently reading The Need to Be Whole, which is like 600 pages long,
Mm-hmm.
but compared to some of the other essay collections, I mean, he's always got good meaty ideas, but like the density of them, I think, is part of why it can be like, it's not as easy as just like reading this interesting story about Athy Keith and like something crazy had happened when he was young with all these characters you've gotten to know. um it's a little bit tougher because I don't know, like it's just more weighty, and it's important, and I appreciate that he has so many different things that he does. But if I had to pick one, no question, it'd be the Port William fiction, then it'd
What's
be the poetry, and then it would be the essays. But that said, I do still enjoy them all.
Yeah, well, and I should say that in this new album, which is called The Hard History of Love, you're weaving together your own songs and poetry, and you have the fiction, and you have these very, very short essays, like sub 2 minutes,
Mhm.
which are like you're speaking over original music to kind of
Mhm.
create this cohesive whole. And so in your own way, you're pulling from all three and creating all three yourself. And so
Mhm.
it makes sense that you're going to resonate with all three.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Although I would say that when I set out to do a Wendell Berry project, well, honestly, I struggled with the focus at first. My album before this, as you referenced, it's called Wonder of It All, and it's based on books like The Horse and His Boy and Watership Down and so on, The Hobbit. And the reason I ended up doing the spoken pieces there is because when I was talking with Chris Hoisington, the producer from Old Bear Studios up in Western New York, well, we were talking at first. He reached out to me about possibly working together because we know some of the same people. And he's like, "What are you gonna do with the next project?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just done this orchestral folk band album with Matt Wheeler and Vintage Heart." So I wasn't sure what was going to come next. And so, but in a couple of conversations, it became pretty clear that the two of my moves, two things I like to do most, tend to be songs based on classic works of literature. And I've done some other ones like that. Usually it's like a couple of them on an album, Old Man the Sea, Les Mis, The Odyssey, whatever. Other things that just might make some reference. But yeah, talking with him, it seems that like doing an album, like a concept of songs that were based on classic works, just made sense. And it was going to be a 5-song EP because that's what I had the budget for, and that's what we were talking about time wise too. And then we also the second theme that emerged was the idea of like some spoken pieces, because
Mm-hmm.
the other thing I play a lot of house concerts, and I love and listening room concerts like in churches and such, and I loved like the interactive aspect. And ever since I've played solo much more than with band in the last few years, I kind of like to like play off the audience, like encourage them to sing along and things, and to tell them stories. And sometimes it's like a little bit of stand-up comedy. It's a little, not really intentionally, but just remarks, and it's a little bit of like heartfelt stories, and like drawing you in so you get to know the characters and what the song's about, like rather than like jumping into a movie cold, having no idea who the people are, and like picking it up 30 minutes after it started, which sometimes how songs can be. It's like, let me tell you a little bit about this, some things you should know, and now let's move forward into this. And so one of the cool things is that Chris was like, "Hey, we could go ahead and do the spoken pieces, and we won't charge anything additional." So the 5-song EP wound up being actually an 11-song album, not counting the instrumental tracks. The poem came, I just ended up writing it while I was watching the sunrise over the Niagara River one morning, and I was like, "Hey, can we record this too?" And they're like, "Sure." Um, so I already had that structure of songs, stories, and poem in place with Wonder of It All. So that brings us up to A Hard History of Love. And so when I was going to do this, well, I wasn't sure what was next, but I wanted to do something literary. And I was talking with my friend Ned Bustard, who's also from Lancaster here. And we were at his Square Halo gallery, and he had done the cover art for Wonder of It All, which is beautiful, totally worth checking out for anyone who's listening and wants to see it later. But we were talking about what's next, and I was like, I feel kind of led, called, what have you, to do something on Wendell Berry's work. But I was telling him, like, it'll probably be like, a song or two be about like fiction, a song or two be about poetry, a song or two be about essays. Like, I thought it would be kind of that sort of approach. And then Ned just was like, what's that one short story collection? It's got like 20 or so stories. You could just like pick your favorite 5 out of that. And I was like, that's brilliant. And so I promptly went. I don't think I had a copy of That Distant Land at the time, but got a copy, reread it with the idea of possibly writing some songs. And I could have written more than just based on 5 of the stories, but I picked up five of my favorites. And yeah, so then I just ended up going with the little pieces, which I decided this time, instead of just titling them chapter 1 or 2 or whatever, like I did on Wonder of It All, I decided to title them Essay, The Dream of Getting Warm, or what, So Far As It Goes, or other things. One, to make it abundantly clear, hey listener, this is going to be a spoken piece. This isn't a song per se, although we did do originals. Instead of doing like one song backing all of the essay pieces like we did with Wonder of It All, there's like musically it bridges the gap, as well as like story wise, it kind of conveys you from one place to the next, particularly when you're going like between the 2 different songs that involve Toll and Minnie, like 30 or so years apart. Interesting. Yeah, like it wasn't probably until we had like the final mixes that I was kind of like thinking about what you just said. It was like, oh yeah, you know what, I do have songs, I've got stories, and I've even got a poem. My long one-sided apprenticeship with Wendell Berry is showing some fruit, and here it is for everyone to enjoy. So it was one of those realizations where, like, kind of like when you listen to a song, or maybe like if you write a story or a piece and you're like, you go back and read it a little later and you're like, this is good, wow, I wrote that. It's yeah, but it just shows that I was just taking it one step at a time, and it turns out like where I wound up is a place that it turns out really liking.
Week after Thanksgiving, one cool November morn, I was braced against the snow, late 1934. The path home over Codman Ridge, the wagon strained with corn, the horse's breath in clouds of white, the dream of getting warm. The 2 appeared as made of wind, a stranger and his son, poorly dressed against the weather, 2 hunched and ragged souls. In so pleasant a place, you don't expect to see a boy so solemn for his age, and a weathered man who turned and barely nodded when I'd say, have you a home?
As you said, there are 23 stories in That Distant Land, and your album really focuses in on 5 of them, and we'll get into the details later, but just so folks know, the 5 stories that you're pulling from are The Hurt Man, A Consent, The Solemn Boy, Making It Home, and Wild Birds. I'm curious, as you were rereading That Distant Land, what was the process of choosing those 5? Was it simply, these are the ones that are most resonating with me? Were you looking for like a cohesive storyline? Because you also have structured your album to go chronologically from 1888 in the first story to 1967. So how do you decide from among those 23, these are the few that I want to focus on?
Well, I could actually pull out, I mean, I recognize this is an audio podcast, but I could produce the steno book where I wrote down the names, or at least a word from the titles of each of the stories. And as I reread each one, basically like some little notation showing like, this is one I definitely want to include, or maybe not so much for this one. Like there's some I just resonated with more than others. And there was also the piece that I did want them to be in chronological order, because one of the most wondrous things about the Port William fiction that I really just love, well, 2 things. One is the continuity. I mean, Wendell Berry's been doing this for like 60 years, and somehow, like, you could probably find some continuity errors somewhere, but they sure aren't glaring if there are any. And I also appreciate that, like, you get this look across these different decades, these different portraits, these different scenes, especially in the short stories, which I would say are probably my favorite form of his Port William writing. But I mean, the novels are great too. I appreciate that, like in The Hurt Man, the character Matt Feltner is someone you get to know as, in the other stories, as an old man, one of the rememberers of his community, and yet, you know, in The Hurt Man, and set in 1888, as you said, he's a 5-year-old boy, you know, on the porch with his mother, who's wearing black because he's the only surviving child and the other 3 have all passed away. And it's like it's a part of his story that really informs a lot of what he has going on later on. And, you know, like, this is multifaceted sort of thing. Like, you know, you read the novel Jayber Crow, and you really get to know a lot about Jayber's inner world and his view of life and faith and this community. But then other places he's like the side character, but it's much richer because you know a lot more about him.
Yes.
And it's like, I'm not into superhero movies, but it's kind of like what I imagine it's like for people who are really into the Marvel comic universe, you know, where there's all these different characters and like their side characters and their main characters. It's like a rural Kentucky 60-year span version of the MCU, I guess.
All that's missing is at the end of one novel, Andy Catlett will return and, you know, ... whatever the next book is, like they do at the end of the Marvel movies.
Right. Yeah. Something like it, like after the acknowledgments, that's like a little bit of a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
You're like, wait a second, this changes everything. What's going to happen next? So I mean, it's so rich, and I appreciate the fact that you can kind of like jump in anywhere. Like, I talked with numerous people, especially talking about this fact I was going to do it. I don't know how many people I've run into who are like I've been meaning to read some Wendell Berry, or like, I know Houston Coley, for one of my friends, he was talking about, like, he came across the Kickstarter, and he said I forget which order this was, but it was like, I just read Jayber Crow and I'm about to read Hannah Coulter, and then I saw this. It's like, I can't wait to dive in more. Like, yeah, like, I hope to introduce a lot of people to Berry's work, and I hope that deepens the appreciation for those who already do know his work. Yeah, there's just so much there, and it's something that I just enjoy so deeply, and it's just genuinely brilliant stuff to be able to, like, kind of take that and translate it into my own language. And also, you know, some people aren't that much into reading, but I think, you know, if they give it a try, they might like it. But the point is that, like, even if you don't know for sure if you want to embark on reading all of Jayber Crow, a relatively longish book, 400 pages or something, and but I mean, you could listen to a 3-minute song, or a suite. You can listen to the entire album, and kind of get a sense of what's going on. It's a bit of an introduction, at least, but in a different form. Yeah. So I mean, there are some places where I'm drawing pretty heavily on Wendell Berry's actual wording, like in using the phrase "a hard history of love," which appears in The Hurt Man, but other times, you know, it's not so much like that. You know, it's much more just original, but kind of riffing on the ideas.
Can we talk a little bit more about your opening song, the title song, A Hard History of Love, which is from that story, The Hurt Man? And as you alluded, like, Matt Feltner is 5 years old. His mother has lost 3 other children. He's the only surviving child. And in the midst of her grief, he sees her show this tremendous amount of tenderness and care for a man who has been wounded in a fight in town.
Yeah.
And there is a passage that I would love for you to read from that short story that I think would kind of set up your album and even set up this next stage of the conversation really well. Would you mind reading that?
I'd be happy to do that. And so it happens I have a copy of The Distant Land. What he saw in her face would remain with him forever. It was pity, but it was more than that. It was a hurt love that seemed to include entirely the hurt man. It included him and disregarded everything else. It disregarded the aura of whiskey that ordinarily she would have resented. It disregarded the blood puddled on the porch floor and the trail of blood through the hall. Matt was familiar with her tenderness and had thought nothing of it. But now he recognized it in her face and in her hands as they went out to the hurt man's wounds. To him, then, It was as though she leaned in the black of her mourning over the whole hurt world itself, touching its wounds with her tenderness in her sorrow. Loss came into his mind then, and he knew what he was years away from telling, even from thinking, that his mother's grief was real, that her children in their graves once had been alive, that everybody lying under the grass up in the graveyard once had been alive and had walked in daylight in Port William. And this was a part and belonged to the deliverance of the town's hard history of love.
Thank you.
Yeah. Maybe chew on that for a while.
Yeah.
That is some really, truly brilliant writing.
And this was a part of a country of trust. And this was a part, a membership of flesh and blood. And this was a part, and belonged to the deliverance of a hard history of love. A hard history of love. A hard history of love.
What resonated with you about this story in particular, and maybe especially about that idea, the hard history of love, and that would go on to, I would assume, kind of shape the whole album in its way?
Yeah, it does set the tone, and I'm really glad that it's the first story chronologically as well. I mean, the story is kind of heavy, but it's got this bittersweetness, and it's got it really rings true and real. Like, as much as I have a sense of humor and like to be whimsical, and actually in the second song that's pretty obvious, but a pretty big change of tone, which I'm glad the essay kind of helps to make that all work transition wise. But I mean, it's I feel like it's a really good introduction to Port William, partly because it's from early on in its history, and I've studied history in college. Besides literature, another one of the fields I really enjoy. There's so much there. It's a bit of a Good Samaritan story. It definitely has some, there's a redemptive quality, and yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. Like, the story starts off honestly just sounding kind of like it's gonna be this kind of humorous, maybe prairie home companion-ish story about this wonderful little town in Kentucky that's kind of rough and tumble, but but then like when the hurt man, the bloodied man, bursts from this crowd and starts heading toward the door, like this tense moment, like, whoa, what's going to happen now? And this woman's home alone with her child, like there's probably going to go hide, but yeah, I mean, like, just the way it unfolds, there's such beauty in it. And the thing too is like Wendell Berry does such a good job, especially in the short stories, I think, of capturing these moments that are seemingly commonplace but wind up being really formative in the lives of the characters.
Well
and
said.
I mean, the stories are so specific, like you get a sense of place, but in this interesting paradox, like when things are really, really specific, they tend to actually strike a chord that's universal. Sure, like not everyone grew up in the late 1800s in Kentucky, but that formational moment in Matt Feltner's life where it dawns on him, like the magnitude of life, the bittersweetness, the love and loss and cost, as I put it in the song, of a darkness shot through with light. I mean, really, if you listen to my music, like James Taylor would say, like he's probably written the same song like dozens of times. Like in some ways, like my big themes tend to be wonder and hope in spite of darkness. And this song actually does both of those things really well. Like, I have the recurring lines, in the first verse, in tenderness, talking about Nancy Feltner, and then in wonderment, describing Matt Feltner's reaction. Like, in a matter of, like, I have to see how many pages this is, but I was just reading from, it's like 11 pages long, and this is a master class in conveying a place, an important moment in a person's life, and something that's relatable to anyone who digs into it. Like, if this is the only piece of Wendell Berry's work you ever read, and you had like 20-30 minutes waiting for a train or something, and this is the one piece you read, I think that that would be a good representation of his work. It gets a good introduction not only to Port William but also Wendell Berry and what he's about. Yeah, I feel like it covers a lot of ground in a short period of time, and not in any kind of a heavy-handed way or hurried way. It's just like, here's this one really sensitive moment in the life of this town and of some key characters in it, and this, I think, it's a bit of, show instead of tell. He just, like, it's like, let me just show you the scene and feel however you're going to about it, but I think you'll find it meaningful.
And as you alluded to earlier, the album ships, with the help of the essay, to two songs that are about Ptolemy Proudfoot and Miss Minnie. And these are many people's, like, some of their favorite characters in Wendell Berry's fiction. Certainly they are mine. The two stories are A Consent and The Solemn Boy from 1908 and then 1934. And Ptolemy Proudfoot is this longtime bachelor, and he has kind of admired from afar the town school teacher, but sees her as way out of his league. Miss Minnie, the school teacher, has kind of seen Ptolemy Proudfoot from afar, but sees him as way out of her league. And so this story, and your song is the song is A Consent, is really about their courtship. I love that tall Proudfoot is tall, and Miss Minnie is Minnie.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and that's why, so the song is called The Ballad of Tall and Many.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where, like, yeah, those are their names, but they're also like, it's a little on the nose, but in this, like, endearing kind of way. Because I mean, of course, Tall's full first name is Ptolemy. Of course, as far as we know, Minnie's full first name is Minnie. But yeah, they're like, they're also the sort of comical pair, partly because of that, because, it's like this gigantic, big man who's also a teddy bear, and this very prim and proper school teacher who's, just been so focused on her work and is, given all to that she just hasn't ever settled down either. I love with this one particularly how, see, I'm flipping around to try to find it precisely, but I know in the essay leading into it, I talked, let's see, the part about how like their love story and them starting their relationship together, like, it is one of the dear possessions of the history of Port William. It's like you get the sense, like, this is the sort of thing that, like, anyone who's around at that time, like they tell at their tables, they tell when they're sitting out on their porch, that Minnie, after Toll has passed, still recalls it and things, and probably the two of them together would, sit and laugh around the fire on a winter's evening, remembering, like, remembering how ridiculous he felt and how awkward he felt at this harvest fest. This was bachelor and just trying to, like, look invisible, but he's huge, so he can't. Like, this is such a sweet and endearing story, and it has its own moments of poignancy as well. But it's maybe the best as far as of Wendell Berry's short stories, as far as, like, there being that comic relief there too. That the way that Toll shows that he cares for Miss Minnie, besides beginning to hang around a little bit this harvest fest and just showing up in the first place, and that's kind of putting a stake in the ground. But then, this cake of her making, it's just this lovely thing, and like he sees it, and it's like he wants to protect it with his life. Like, just about to that extent. And so when time comes to auction it, like, he is not going to let anyone else win. And I cover it in kind of short form in the song, because there's already, so many verses. They're all short. But just like this scene where, like, he's in this little bit of a bidding war, and then he goes absurdly above, like, what anyone could possibly have imagined. It's a bit like in Groundhog Day when Andy McDowell's character bids on Bill Murray's character in the Bachelor auction. She literally has her checkbook out and says $379 and however many cents, and they stop the bidding, and then it's just like this splashy moment in the story. So same here, but yeah, it's just so winsomely told, and it just feels like one of those great stories that a family or community would have. And Wendell Berry just does such a great job of that. And the song itself then is similarly, like, light and jubilant. it's such a great story. Like there was no question I wanted to see if there was a way I could work this in. The challenge with all of these though is like a lot of times people haven't read the story. So in short form, in like, 3 minutes, because I don't think there's a single song here is longer than three, no, maybe longer than 4 minutes or so. So I need to provide the context to where, I mean, I've got the essay to help. The essay before does set the stage for that, but to sum it up and say all these things in a way that's also musically going to sound interesting. And I do even pull in a little bit of James Whitcomb Riley with, I think that's a poet, that When the Frost is on the Pumpkin. Except for I made it the pumpkin because I don't know. Yeah, I mean, like there's a few different things that just kind of work together there, but mostly it was just most of these, not all the songs, most of them are kind of like just narrating what was happening in the short story in song form. This is one of those.
The story of their courtship, which is called one of the dear possessions of the history of Port William, for folks who love this story, love this characters, like it becomes one of our dear possessions as well. And I will say that I listened to the album for the first time when I was driving to meet my friend for dinner, actually the co-host of this podcast. And when this song started playing, I don't even think I knew at first that it was about Tall and Minnie. Well, maybe I did because of the essay, but I don't even think the lyrics had started yet. But it's just a fun song. I smiled like a goofball like the whole time it was playing. It's a great song about two of my favorite characters.
Ptolemy Proudfoot, a mountain of a man, humble and honest and in touch with the land. Gotta serve the work, do the best that you can, oh so far as it goes. Miss Minnie Quinch was tiny and petite, smart as a whip and quick on her feet. Gotta serve the work, teach the kids, take your seat, oh so far as it goes. But he felt beneath her notice, and she didn't know he cared. But a remedy would find them in a story they could share. When the frost is on the pumpkin and the leaves are burning red and the fields are ripe for harvest and a chill is in the air, well, told he got his courage up to go harvest.
That's one of the things that makes these stories feel true to life. The fact that you've got this bittersweet, meaningful, shaping moment in these like big profound ways, like and then you've got this just like this fun and endearing story. Like life's like that sometimes, where it's where it just feel like the scenes are all jumbled up, but it's all for a reason. But yeah, like you might not understand it at the time. So yeah, the fact that you've got this and actually with instrumentation, like when I play a Hard History of Love solo, yeah, it's definitely much sweeter sounding as far as the like the instrumentation. But yeah, like there's like these heavy piano pieces that kind of give, like, it focuses more on the gravity of the story, like the lightness of it. Anyway, but yeah, with this one, there was no question this is just going to be a fun tune. Mandolin is kind of like let to run free all over it, and to good effect. And yeah, it's just fun.
Wendell Berry in his short stories, actually in all of his fiction, will sometimes have these very brief but very effective characterizations. And one of my favorites is in this short story when he's talking about Tall Proudfoot. Berry says that his farm was 98 acres and it never, like, he was never interested in getting the other two to make it an even 100.
Yeah.
Like there's just a kind of self assuredness about that, but also it fits into a frequent theme of Wendell Berry's, which is about both the power and frankly the necessity of limits. And all of that is a very very tortured segue to a question I wanted to ask you actually about an interview that you gave with the Rabbit Room, because I thought this was really interesting. You were saying that the process of writing an album, writing a song based on a classic work of literature about other people and other places that really narrows your focus, but you were saying that limitations can be freeing. So like I said, tortured
Yes.
segue, but I wanted to ask you about this. As you were writing these songs, how was limitation freeing for you?
I mean, like on the day to day, I don't know if I necessarily think of my life as being exceedingly busy, but when I really sit down and think about it and talk with other people about it, I realize like I'm spinning a lot of plates any given time. I'm a husband, I'm a father of a special needs teenager he's just recently became a teenager, most cheerful person that I know, but so there's that, and then I work full time at a college. And of course there's music, which is I'm a sometimes touring artist for that, and certainly a recording artist, and I lead worship music, and I do some writing for a Canadian music blog and for SongRx with UTR Media, and like all these other different things. And I'm also still an avid reader, and I'm learning piano, so like I tend to have a lot of things going on, but I find that having a prompt to write to or something specific to write about is really helpful. Like some of my songs, there's like this inspiration, and like I have a song called Safer that I just got a new guitar and I sat down with it and started playing this Kings of Convenience song melody. And I liked half the melody and like turned that into a different melody. And before my dinner was done, I had the first draft of this song, and I hadn't sat down to write for anything in particular. But I find it so much easier for me to have something particular to write to. Well, I'm not a big fan of playing a bunch of cover songs, although sometimes I do for fun. I have a series on YouTube where I do that. I do like drawing on something that the other people will know and hopefully like I do. So writing about literature just seems like it's been a really great fit for that. So like when the concept for the last album and this album have come about, like to have something specific, it's like, all right, now I have some direction. Sometimes a multitude of options feels like too many choices. Mm-hmm. Like you write about any number of things or any number of things that's going on in my own life, and of course I always wind up writing some of myself into these. But it's really quite niche what I do, but I just find that it's it's very fulfilling for me, and I feel like in recent years, the last 5 or 6 years, I really connected with people who are in that niche. And it's dawned on me, I don't have to try to write songs that everyone who possibly listens is going to love. I'm going to write songs that I feel like I can write well about certain things that I really enjoy and love. And perhaps it might not be everyone out there, might not be the number one performing artist on Spotify, but if there's dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of people who also enjoy it, all the better. Mm-hmm. Alan Levi was doing he's a singer-songwriter and author, and he did an interview for, I think it was for a podcast, one of the Rabbit Room podcasts, and he was talking about having a microscopic but avid fan base, which I really like that. I feel like that's pretty much where I'm at. And that's okay, you be faithful with what you got, mm-hmm. And I've found that to be really fulfilling. So yeah, the limitation of needing to take a particular story, find an angle, it's either going to be narrating what's happening here or from one of the characters' perspective, like the next song 1934 is, mm-hmm. It's more directly from Toll's perspective 30 years later. Or if it's something like the last song, which we'll probably talk about as well, The Way We Are, mm-hmm. where rather than The Wild Birds was a story that I don't know how I was going to give enough context for this to be meaningful. So I focused on something that Burley Coulter said and made the song around that idea, and also sort of as a retrospective for the album. Yeah. I'm kind of skipping all around the rest of the album at this point, but the point is I enjoy and I embrace that challenge. And I feel like I've done it enough times now that I've gotten to feel confident with it. I guess the idea is like I'm looking at a story, looking at a Consent, for instance, and I'm this song, this story really grabs me, but why? And so I'll jot out phrases. As I was writing these, I was writing down particular phrases and what pages they were on, so I could revisit that once I started to work on melody ideas. Yeah, just kind of built it from there, but then with the intention of not trying to it's not trying to make a movie adaptation and trying to make it as faithful as possible. The idea is just like, well, what's something really striking about this story? What's something Wendell Berry was really trying to say, at least what I got from it, and why do I love, the story? Why do I find this brilliant? And then it's like, all right, let me start with that and let me make it about that. And I might use some of the same words Wendell Berry used, mostly words of my own, but conveying some similar ideas. And like hopefully, I find a good test of a song is like, you write a draft, you record it on the, your voice memos, and then you come back to it maybe a week later, the next day, whatever. And if it still holds up, keep working on it. And if not, you're like, well, yeah, this little part of that was good, but the rest of it, no, I think I just got to chuck that. That's okay. It's once you write for quantity, you do wind up, eventually getting good quality. We sift it all down. So although I will say, like, it's not like I wrote 30 songs for this album and these are the ones. It's like I really did set out to write the number of songs that are on there, but they went through some different iterations. And like I said, A Hard History of Love, the recorded version, instrumentally is pretty different. Even the arrangement was a little different, like song structure wise, but in a way that like we just kind of molded and shaped it in the studio, and I'm happy with who we came out with.
It's a hard decision to do this, but for the sake of time, I do want to kind of skip to the fifth and final song on the album, and that's the song The Way We Are. And as you have said, The Way We Are is based on the short story The Wild Birds. It takes place in 1967, and it features Burley Coulter, at least another one of my absolute favorite characters. He's in a discussion with his friend and lawyer Wheeler Catlett, and there's this quote that actually it's the quote from which we got the name of our podcast, The Membership. Burley says, "The way we are members of each other, all of us, everything. The difference ain't in who is a member and who is not, but in who knows it and who don't." Would you mind talking a bit about this concept of membership? What does it mean to you? And you could take that question anywhere you want to, as an artist, husband and father, as a neighbor, all of the above. Like, talk a little bit about membership.
I mean, I think it does encapsulate all those things, or it can. I would start with, as a Christian, one of the senses of membership is that every person is made in the image of God, whether they like it or not. And it's, so there's a certain dignity. I mean, like, I think a lot of times, societally, we talk about like what people should have rights and what people are important and why we should protect and preserve them. And we should, but we don't really ever talk about the why. And I think that Christianity gives the best answer I've heard to that. And that it's like every person was made in the image of God. Like, even if it's pretty buried down in there somewhere, there's something there. And so in some sense, there is, the whole idea of the brotherhood of man, of humankind. In a very real way, it's about that. My song Harbor, that the single I released some years ago, delves into that and kind of more on that level. But I mean, there's other things too. So Burley's, he's talking about like people being a member of the community, and that basically it's like they're born into it. And I do feel like these days, like so many times people are not staying where they grew up, but moving all about. I mean, my family moved from Indiana to North Carolina when I was 14. And then I also lived in Virginia and Maryland and now Pennsylvania. And I just not too long ago passed the amount of time I've been in Pennsylvania is past the amount of time I was in Indiana. I think part of the reason why Pennsylvania feels like the first place that's really felt like home in a deep sense since Indiana is because we have so many. Well, one, we've been in this same town, this town of Mount Joy, Pennsylvania, for now since 2007. And we put down roots here, and my wife has a large family. She has 7 siblings, and all of them live within 40 minutes of where I'm sitting right now. And we get together regularly. My parents moved here and they're 5 minutes away. I often am driving through Mount Joy and like literally out loud to myself, maybe it's like I'm driving down Main Street and the Christmas decorations are up and it's like dark and it's 5:30, but it's like this quiet and serene moment. I'll be like, I really do love this town.
Mm.
It's really become my home now. And so there's that sense as well. But I mean, there's also like the depth of like family and deep friendships, and the connections there. Like my brother, who I'm very close with, lives in Virginia, so I don't see him often, but we stay in touch regularly, and we're clearly part of the same membership as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there are so many different facets you can look at it. I think that the common theme is that there's this belonging, that there's a kind of like a deep belonging that maybe isn't even something you chose for yourself, but that you've matured enough to lean into it and realize like this really is an important part of who I am. And I think that's something that almost all of Wendell Berry's Port William characters get, and that is Andy Catlett character, basically Wendell himself in fictionalized form, really gets deeply. And like part of the reason he becomes a member of the Port William membership, and that he calls it the Port William membership, is because like that's his it's like his term of endearment to refer to this whole group of people living and who have passed on before,
Mm-hmm.
who are part of that group, who had that common bond of blood, of friendship, of shared work, of appreciation for the land and for each other, or respect. So it's all of those things. Like
Mm-hmm.
membership just really is a term that wraps it all up in a really beautiful and messy package.
Yes. And it occurs to me too that the way that you've chosen to record and release this album is itself a kind of membership. They're the
Mm-hmm.
people with whom you recorded the album.
Yeah.
And maybe you could talk a bit about that, but then also how you're choosing to put it out into the world. You are gathering a whole community of supporter collaborators on Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the fact is that when I made Wonder of It All, it was with the Old Bear Studio guys up in Batavia, New York, and I, most of them I was meeting like moments before we were recording my songs, but which still worked out great. But the second time around coming back, it was like, hey, great to see you guys again. We actually did one last day in the studio because we had a better sense of how each other worked and what we were doing with the structure of this project. So there's definitely that, and I really appreciate the Old Bear guys a lot for all of their wildly creative ideas, including percussion on this album, and also the previous one was actually done on books. Like I have some
awesome.
videos of us flapping pages of like The Need to Be Whole, or I know I brought my signed copy of Citizenship Papers, but I'm pretty sure we didn't like drum on it or anything. So like literally the books are part of the sounds, and that was Chris Hoisington and Old Bear studio. Like that was their idea. So there's that. And then, with Wonder of It All, I just funded it myself, and I could have done that with this, but well, one, I released that album in 2021, which was during the pandemic, and it was kind of a non-event, but it was well received, and but like it wasn't like, it was just very different, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
With this, I definitely wanted to invite people along, and those who watch the Kickstarter video will see like I'm inviting people to partner with me on it. Actually the amount that I'm looking to raise isn't the full amount that's going to, that I'll incur total. A lot of it's my own, just investing still, but I wanted people to feel like they were a part of it, that they could be, a meaningful piece of this happening. And it's vulnerable. You throw something like that out there, and you hope that people are going to understand, to care, and hopefully also to care enough to support. And thankfully, thus far they have been, and so sometimes in surprising ways, and people I never would have guessed, but they really resonate with the theme, which that's one of the ways that such a theme as this really does help. Like even if people don't have any idea about my music, if they like the idea of like songs based on Wendell Berry's work, they might just be on board anyway. And there's also people who have no idea who Wendell Berry is, who just want to back me because they want to support my music and see it succeed, or like it's a wide variety, but it's a varied group, just like the Port William group is such a wide cast of characters. And like even just flipping through the backer report recently, like it's like I see like it's a bit of like that old show, This Is Your Life, where it's like like, here's a voice from your past, Matt Wheeler. And then it'll be, and it's someone that, like, I went to college with, and then it's someone that I know from this sphere of music. And then it's someone I work with at the college. And then it's like my cousin who lives in the Midwest or whatever, like, just for example. So it's cool to see people rally around this. I mean, I feel like when you have an album coming out, it's a bit like expecting a child. Like, I've only ever seen that secondhand, obviously as a man, but it's like you've been working on, you've been working on like growing this thing that you really love, and it's going to be amazing, and you think everyone else is going to love it too, but you don't necessarily, but you hope they will. You don't know for sure, I guess. And so it's not a perfect metaphor, but it's like, well, to carry out the metaphor, it's like Kickstarter is like the baby shower, if you will. And like these people who care and they haven't met the baby yet, the song and stories baby, maybe I'm taking this metaphor too far, but they haven't met this album baby, but album child, what have you, but they're showing support, that they're going to be there with me, as the album is born. And so it's cool. And I'm grateful. And it's a little different perhaps doing this. I mean, there's a couple of different schools of thought on, like, when you do a Kickstarter, sometimes it's like, we need this level of funding or we can't make this album, it'll never happen. But I've recorded this in March and I'm running this in August. So it's like, this is mostly done, but I need your help to launch this.
Yeah.
But the nice thing with that is then I can actually, it's like, oh, here's what you're backing. Like, here's a taste. Here's one of the songs. Here's the song in the background of the Kickstarter video. So the song "The Way We Are" is intended to kind of encapsulate that. Like, the chorus literally, now that's one of those direct quotes. It kind of bookends with like "Hard History of Love" being a direct quote, and then like, "The way we are, we're members of each other, all of us, everything." And then there's where I added on, "Together we'll see many seasons, a joy in spite of reasons, a love that endures anything." It's like, yeah, it's kind of me extending the thought. But when you start off this bittersweet, there's all this love and loss and cost, but there's this deep goodness, to start with. And we go through a lot of contours, including, meeting these unusual strangers and trying to, like, I really like where I wound up leaving off the song 1934. And I won't spoil that for anyone who's not heard it, but so there's all like kind of mystery in that. And then there's like, the soldier who's coming home and like leaving the war behind him as he walks home. And like, there's all these different facets, these different people in these different situations. In the case of the second and third songs, it's the same people, some of the same people, but 30 years apart. But then, like, to bring it all back, and it's like, what's the commonality in all of this? It's, we are members of each other. This is our shared hard history of love. And so I felt like those two songs really bookended nicely as far as like just kind of capturing where I wanted to go with this album, and highlight some of the themes in Barry's own work.
Yep. Part of the membership that is bringing this album to life is our mutual friend Ned Bustard, who you mentioned earlier. He's an artist and writer, gallery owner, publisher. A lot of folks might know his work from the Every Moment Holy books. He's also done some great children's books with InterVarsity Press, and he did the album art for A Hard History of Love, and it's great. And actually, one of the rewards or bonuses in Kickstarter is a T-shirt that is like based on that is this album art, and that's, I don't know, I supported it. No pressure. I'm not trying to.
Thank you.
Well, yeah. I don't know. I'm supposed to be giving in secret, right? But still, like, I supported it, and I wanted to make sure I got that T-shirt because it looks really cool. But it's great. Like, so can you talk a little bit about working with Ned to do the album art?
Yeah, and though, like, thankfully, I might have the good problem of needing to figure out like some stretch goals. And one of them, I don't know if it'll be a stretch goal or just a regular add-on. I'm thinking of, I need to confer with Ned about like some prints of that. Yes. Like, that's the sort of thing I think that people would enjoy, like framing.
We have three prints of his in our house. Yeah.
Well, I know, of course, that, listeners aren't gonna be able to see this, but right over my shoulder is a print of from the liturgy before taking the stage, from Every Moment Holy, which I regularly say a liturgy before I take the stage. Usually a house concert stage or church concert stage. But so Ned He, I guess I first got to know of him because he was an adjunct professor at Lancaster Bible College where I work. But then more recently, he's the curator and runs Square Halo Gallery in Lancaster, right in the middle of downtown, in a building that's actually also owned by the college where I work. I remember when I was formulating the ideas of Wonder of It All, and I was thinking that this is, I mean, I'd gotten plugged into the Rav Room community. I was probably a few months deep into it at that point, but I already knew Ned. We're already Facebook friends, but didn't know each other real well, not really well. But I remember I floated the idea to him in a message. I was like, "Hey, I've got this idea for this song based on these stories." And I mapped out like Little Prince and Orthodoxy and the other ones I mentioned earlier, and I figured like I might hear from him within a week. He got back to me like an hour and was like this sounds amazing, count me in. And I was like, cool, what's your rate? And he was like, we'll talk about that later. I'm totally interested in being part of this. I'm like, okay. Yeah, we did come up with something reasonable later, but yeah, I love what he came up with. It really captured the idea of wonder that the album is about. And so it came time to do this one, and he was instrumental in actually helping me narrow the focus. And so he actually had a direction piece there. But we were talking about what the cover art was going to look like what it would evoke, like in Wonder of It All, like there's a nod to each of the stories. But this one I was thinking I think we just want to focus on just one of the stories, maybe something a little closer to like what's in Every Moment Holy. And The Hurt Man just seems like it made sense. It's a very evocative story, and the piece that he's made. One thing he does really, really well is like in a single panel, like really, really capturing the essence of what's going on, like making something that'll make you think and feel, and that you'll remember. And he really did that well with this one, as well. And in typical Ned Bustard fashion, there are little nods, little things that you might not immediately pick up on, like a fun Easter egg for listeners of this podcast I haven't pointed out to anyone else, is that if you look at the kettle closely in the graphic, he put my initials on it, MW. So there's like stylized, just like look like it's his decoration on the side of this little kettle. And turns out like it's, yeah, he sent it to me. I was like, yeah, look there, you'll see your initials. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And like there's a kind of literal scene of like, Nancy Fellner staunching the Hurt Man's wounds, but there's also like little nods to like the baptism of Jesus by John the Baptist, like the the white birds just kind of, the birds descending, like showing approval, like suggesting this spiritual element. I just shared about that online earlier today, and I saw a bit ago someone commented like, hey, like who did the art? I have a guess, but who who was it? Of course I told her it was Ned, and I'm sure that was her guess, because like he has a distinct style, which is part of the reason I really love working with him on this kind of thing. So and the process is really cool too. Like he'll show me like the piece of linoleum that he's like carved to be what ends up being the mirror image, but and then we it goes through all these iterations. Before that, it's a sketch. We kicked around a few things before we wound up. Actually, I did a sketch in return, and I'm not the visual artist he is, but I can draw a little. I was like, this is kind of how I was thinking the characters would be oriented, more or less, and then he did like a master version of what I had in mind. It's great to work with him, but it's also like he's part of the Lancaster membership of the creative.
Yes,
Lancaster's got a great creative scene, and so to work with people who are right geographically my neighbors, it just feels fitting. Like I think I would have done it anyway, but it's just like, especially for this one, it just feels like it makes sense.
Totally. I love that how you put that. He's part of the Lancaster membership. That's great. And how fitting then that he would be a part of this again. Well, as you and I are talking, the Kickstarter is 75% funded. I think last time I looked, we were like, I say we, what? Last time I looked.
You're part of this membership too, John.
Okay, I mean, yeah, all right. I had a very minimal part, but I'm a part of it, and I love that.
You are a part of it. For real.
Last time I looked, our membership had close to 100 backers. Pretty close. So maybe when people are listening to this, I can't tell you where it is, but what I do know is that the Kickstarter ends very early in the morning on Friday, August 25th, like 7 a.m. So if
Yeah.
if this is something you'd like to support, which I hope that it is, I definitely encourage you to go check it out. But I also urge you not to wait until Friday morning, because it may be done at that point.
It
But
might be too late by then.
yeah, but we will include a link to the Kickstarter in the show notes so that people can go there directly. Matt, is there anything that we haven't talked about, either about the Kickstarter, the album, or anything else that we should touch on before we kind of wrap up?
We've covered a lot of ground for sure. Yeah, well, and I even talked about the books being used as to make sounds.
I love
to
that.
and it is literally Wendell Berry books, so it's so on brand, and I love it. And which is also why I haven't had new bookmarks made for this, but we do have bookmarks. I have bookmarks made for they're leather bookmarks made by Growly Leather that have the a Narnian horse on it from the Wonder of It All graphic. I might do something like that with like a new run of bookmarks that have like one of the birds on it, perhaps. I don't know. We'll see.
Growly Leather is great. I just ordered a Padfolio from them 2 weeks ago, which it'll be my second. I met them at Hutchmoot.
Yeah,
and they do great work. And those, I did see those bookmarks. They look pretty sweet.
and what a good story too. This family business, and yeah, like I recommend people check out Growly Leather's website where they can read about that, but let them tell their story in their own words. But yeah, like, and those are people that I met through the Rabbit Room. And I mean, it's like that. The Rabbit Room is a really beautiful and has been very formative for me version of membership as well. You know, like just like getting involved there and feeling like I found my tribe. And like so a big shout out to the Rabbit Room for their influence, and like the tangible things like Matt Connor's interview about the album, and you know, them putting Erebus on their literary playlist, which you could totally check out. They got lots of good playlists, but yeah, like just like all these little ways, like people that I met, like when I went to Hutchmoot, like I feel like one way that I feel like it was a precursor to Heaven and the New Creation is this idea of like meeting people for the first time and feeling like you've been old friends. There's a line that Gonzo sings in the Muppet movie, one of my favorite films ever.
One of mine too. And you have a new single that I saw. I love it. That was the first movie I ever saw in the theater. I'm wild about that soundtrack. Totally. Okay, Gonzo. Though. Yes.
So I don't remember. It was providential, I'm sure, but like for reasons I don't particularly remember, I was driving to Hutchmoot for the first time last October, and maybe it was shuffle. Maybe I thought of a lyric from the song, decided to listen to it. Maybe I was listening to Moving Right Along, which I also really love, and came across that next. I don't remember exactly, but I ended up on the drive listening to I'm Going to Go Back There Someday.
Yes.
And I heard this listen that hit me differently. This one line that hit me differently than I recall hearing before. And that was where Gonzo says, you know, there's not a word yet for old friends who've just met. And it's like so that's, I mean, and there's a bunch of things about this song that seem to hint at Heaven and the New Creation as well, which may or may not have been what the songwriters had in mind. But then I got to Hutchmoot, and there were these great experiences right off the bat, including meeting Matt Connor in person for the first time, and him saying we should totally, you know, talk about your music. There at the Rabbit Room, like, yes, but there's all these people who I'd known from online, but it was like we were old friends, and a lot of people I sat with at dinner who I hadn't even met that way. That it was just like we had our common faith in Christ, and a lot of interests, you know, like, you know, we could mention Watership Down, and one of us could say that, and the other person didn't think it was like some like submarine adventure or something, but it's about rabbits for those who aren't sure. It's about more than just rabbits, but it is about rabbits. So yeah, like that was an experience that I feel like was sort of foreshadowing that way. But I feel like the Rabbit Room does a good job of cultivating a genuine membership, maybe not a geographic one so much, but they do that well, and they encourage other people to do that where they are at really well. I mean, we're in such a placeless society these days, you know. Everything is so transient, I guess, you know, like you know, people are at, you know, in 10 years might have 5 different jobs, you know, might live in, you know, 8 different houses, like, you know, they're just there's so much rootlessness, if that's a word. And Wendell Berry's work really calls that out, but also but winsomely. Like it calls it out in a way that it's like, well, in the essays, maybe Wendell talks about more directly, but in the Poor William stories, it's more like, well, let's look at what it looks like when people know their neighbors and get along well with them and respect them. And people are living out the commandment of Jesus to love your neighbor. Like, what does that look like in actual life scenes? And that's what I think that's maybe a good place to land it, is that's one of the things I see in Wendell Berry's writing, all of it, all the different forms, but especially the Poor William fiction. And I think that like in summary, after all of that talking about it, that's probably what I most enjoy about it and find most meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Well, where else can, in addition to the Kickstarter link, which again is in the show description, where else can people connect with you online to see, about future shows, other albums, other projects you have going on? Where's the best place for people to connect?
Sure. So mattwheeleronline.com is the hub, so to speak. So that's my website, of course, as you may have put together. But yeah, so that's one good place. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram. If people look up Matt Wheeler, well, on Instagram it's Matt Wheeler VH, a holdover from my band Matt Wheeler and Vintage Heart. But there are a lot of other Matt Wheelers, including several that make music. So yeah, so I mean, of course, yeah, if you do a search for Matt Wheeler and Hard History of Love, you'll find the correct artist. Mm-hmm. If you're looking for me. And so yeah, the Facebook, Instagram, my website. Yeah, there's other places that might pop up. I do a series on YouTube. I mean, if you look up Matt Wheeler Black and White series, I started during the pandemic. I decided to record the John Foreman song "Your Love Is Strong" and put a black and white filter on it. And then the next month, not really meaning to make a series, I recorded my son's favorite song, "I Don't Want to Live on the Moon," the Ernie song from Sesame Street, which is really a poignant and beautiful song, and humorous. So I decided to do that, and that was installment 2, and now I'm on like 32, I think will be next. So yeah, people can find some of my cover songs, my interpretations there, including some probably surprising ones. The most recent one is an acoustic version of the theme to "Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego," the PBS show. So like, yeah, I'm a man of varied tastes when it comes to the music that I make, because it's, I definitely like to laugh and have fun and be lighthearted, but I also like the serious singer-songwriter literary stuff and poetry and big words and things. So yeah, like there's different channels depending on what flavor of those things you like. You can find, I think that you'll find amusing and enjoyable. So
awesome. Well, this has been just so much fun. We can't remember if we actually met each other in person in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, at Ned's Gallery. If we didn't, it was great to meet you today. Thank you so much for this time. Congratulations on the album Hard History of Love, which is so good, and good luck with the Kickstarter. I really do encourage folks to check it out. This is, I don't know, I think it's the kind of thing we should be supporting as a community. So it's really wonderful.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time, John, and to what I was just saying, it feels like we're old friends. Like we could have been on the same hall in college and played spades and such, and like we're just getting back together. Even if we met once in Lancaster, that would have been the only time. But yeah, so certainly Mr. Berry's work has given us a lot to it's a lot of food for thought and good stuff to talk about. So
absolutely,
yeah, happy to have the conversation. Thank you for taking the time.
Yep. And thanks for inspiring us to get a move on and bring the podcast back.
I happy to have some small part in doing that. I was delighted when you let me know that this was going to be the conduit for that to happen. It's like, it's kind of surreal, but wonderful. So
we've been talking about it for months. And when I saw your Kickstarter, I told you the story. I'll tell the listeners. My new co-host and I had been talking about bringing it back for months, and just had not gotten around to doing it. The Kickstarter popped up, and I sent a text with the link to the Kickstarter to my co-host. And I said, I think we need to launch right away in time to support this Kickstarter. and use this as our final motivation just to get going. So thank you for that.
Happy to kickstart more than just my own album.
Awesome. Great. Thanks again.
Absolutely.
Well, friends, thank you for joining us for this episode of The Membership. Remember that the link to Matt's Kickstarter campaign is in the show notes. In our next episode, David and I will be talking about Wendell Berry's children's book, Whitefoot, A Story from the Center of the World. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all at Membership Pod. And our website is membershippod.com. The Membership is a proud member of the Rabbit Room Podcast Network. You can find more great podcasts at rabbitroom.com/podcast. Thanks, everyone, and we will see you next time.